It began with a silence that was louder than any shout. In the last few hours, the operational core of the White House has effectively ceased to function. A coordinated mass resignation of top officials has left the West Wing hollowed out, triggered by a standoff that legal experts are calling a complete breakdown of the executive branch. This is not a political disagreement. It is a constitutional fracture, and it centers on a single critical question. What happens when the government stops taking orders from the president? Here are the confirmed facts. Late last night, during a private emergency meeting in the White House Situation Room, the Chief of Staff, the National Security Advisor, and multiple deputy secretaries from the Department of Defense and the Department of Homeland Security submitted their resignations simultaneously. Their letters, leaked shortly after, cite an irreconcilable conflict with President Donald J. Trump regarding his refusal to comply with a ruling issued earlier today by the Supreme Court. Everything now depends on whether the Department of Justice, currently led by a temporary appointee, moves to enforce this 6-3 decision because the ruling legally mandates the immediate surrender of documents linked to election interference and the mishandling of secret government documents. The president's refusal has stripped away the usual political buffers. We are no longer waiting for a court date. We are looking at a hard deadline. The specific consequences will likely be determined during the emergency session of Congress scheduled for tomorrow. But why did these loyalists choose this specific moment to break ranks? The answer lies in the tone of the resignation letters. 1. Written by the acting attorney general, explicitly states that continuing to follow the president's directives would mean violating the Constitution. This suggests the administration has moved past legal maneuvering into territory that these officials viewed as a direct national security risk. But the most telling signal isn't what is being said, it's who isn't speaking. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Speaker Mike Johnson have issued no defense. Their offices are silent. Reports indicate that privately, Republican leadership is in a state of panic, shifting from loyalty to damage control. The calculation has changed. It appears that for the party's insiders, surviving the upcoming midterm elections now requires cutting ties. We are seeing a rapid dissolve of the political shield that usually protects the Oval Office. Leaked text messages from senior aides reportedly contain phrases like, "We can't go down with the ship," revealing that the resignation was not a spontaneous protest, but a planned exit strategy executed after a week of failed internal negotiations. The silence from staunch allies like Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz acts as a deafening confirmation. The political cost of defending the president has finally outweighed the benefit. If the people who built the president's power base are walking away, who is left to enforce his orders? The standoff has now triggered automatic enforcement protocols buried deep in federal law. A federal judge in Washington, D.C. has issued an order requiring the president to appear in person or face an arrest warrant. This is the pivot point. The legal system is no longer asking for compliance. It is preparing to compel it. The machinery of the state has begun to turn against its own head. While the White House goes dark, the activity on Capitol Hill has become explosive. Verification is needed on specific details, but sources state that a secret meeting took place in the old Senate chamber this morning involving more than 12 Republican senators. It was allegedly a revolt. Senator Susan Collins and Senator Mitt Romney reportedly spoke openly about the threat to the Republic, while Senator Josh Hawley, previously a vocal supporter, released a statement affirming that the rule of law must prevail. This domestic fracturing is being mirrored by international alarm. NATO has issued a rare statement of concern, and markets are reacting violently, with Dow Jones Futures dropping 800 points. The concern is stability. Can the U.S. government function? Senior military leaders from the Pentagon have reportedly briefed Congress to confirm that the military chain of command remains intact, regardless of the chaos in the executive branch. Meanwhile, the president is reportedly isolated in the White House residence, surrounded by a shrinking circle of loyalists. His attempts to communicate via Truth Social are generating less engagement than usual, suggesting a fatigue even among his base. He has attempted to issue counter-orders to federal agencies, but in a stunning development, career employees are refusing to follow them, citing the Hatch Act and the risk of personal legal liability. The firewall of bureaucracy has turned into a concrete wall. But with the 25th Amendment difficult to invoke due to the empty cabinet seats, is there any mechanism left to resolve this before it spills into the streets? The procedural posture is unprecedented. The Justice Department has officially notified the White House that contempt of court proceedings will commence within 48 hours. This is not a warning, it is a procedural trigger. Because the Supreme Court appeal was denied, there are no more legal off-ramps. The strategy from the remaining government institutions appears to be containment and isolation. By cutting off the president from the standard tools of power and securing sworn statements from the officials who resigned, the system is building a legal cage. The possibility of asset seizure, freezing campaign funds or business assets, is now on the table as a method of pressure. The government is effectively surgically removing the president's authority while leaving the title in place, waiting for the clock to run out. The immediate focus is now the 48-hour deadline set by the Justice Department. If the president does not comply by that window, the timeline shifts from political maneuvering to law enforcement action. The emergency session of Congress tomorrow will likely determine whether the legislature moves to speed up impeachment articles for obstruction of justice. The barricades going up along Pennsylvania Avenue are real. The silence from the residents is real. The next move belongs to the federal marshals and the temporary leadership at the DOJ. The question is no longer if they will act, but simply when the deadline expires in 48 hours, who opens the doors?